What's up, everybody, and welcome to today's Tableau walkthrough. In this video, we're going to talk about creating a data story in Tableau. You might want to use a story to make your data visualizations more compelling by showing how facts are connected to each other. This also can help you show how decisions relate to outcomes. Then you can publish your story or present it to an audience. And each story point can contain a different view or worksheet, a dashboard, or even an entire story in itself. So, depending on what you want your visualization to do, you could typically use stories to tell or present to a stakeholder or a business partner, and it will all be encompassed in Tableau. So, it's basically Tableau's own PowerPoint. To create a data story in Tableau, you first want to have access to all your dashboards and views or worksheets that you're going to put within your story and add to your story points. For this particular example, I'm going to have a template that is already created for you. You can find this on your course page or in the video description. Let's actually get into it. First thing we need to do is make sure the template is actually downloaded. So make sure you download template first. Then once you've downloaded, you can open it in Tableau. To do this, you can navigate to File in the toolbar, hit Open. Then right now, my template is stored in my download folder. I'm going to click it and then go to Open. Now I have access to the dashboard that was created and the template that was created so that I can create my story. To create a story, you need to navigate to this bottom tool pan, and it's right next to the dashboard icon is the story icon. This is what you need to get access to the story workspace. So I am going to click on that. Now you have access to the story workspace, which is kind of similar to the dashboard workspace, but has different nuances. So let's actually talk about the workspace. So first you have the story pane where you have all your seats and workspaces and views right under here. The next thing you have this drag to add text, so you can add text to your storyboard. Then at the bottom you have the access to the sides. For this particular case, I can keep it a story, but I want to make it automatic just so I know that it automatically fits on my screen. So if you click that arrow right next to story, under fixed size, click that arrow again, then click automatic. Now it will automatically fit to your screen. The next thing I want to talk about is the layout pane. The layout pane is right next to the story pane. If you click it, it'll show you different options. And this is where you choose your navigator style and display or hide the forward or backward arrows in your description. So, for example, currently have caption boxes, but let's say we want to do numbers. We want to just do dots, which is pretty ambiguous or anonymous. And then you can just use arrows. But for this particular example, we're going to use caption boxes. The next thing I want to talk about is the story menu. So the story menu is right next to the dashboard menu. So as you see, it's very progressive. You start with a worksheet, then you go into a dashboard, and then you go into a story. The story, similar, you can just create a new story here. You can format it. You can clear the story, and then you have the access to either show the title or not show the title. If I click it, title removes itself, but I'm going to keep the title for this example. Now let's get into the creation of our story. Before we create our story, we first need to identify what our story is going to entail. This story is going to be about earthquake trends over time. And given we have started with the template, we have this map dashboard, which is below, right next to our storyboard. If we click this map dashboard, this will take us to a dashboard that shows us first a representation of the world and the number of earthquakes that have happened in the world over a certain period of time. To the right, we have a couple filters, which is a date time filter on the particular earthquake. We have the magnitude of an earthquake. We have the regions in the world, which could be APAC, EMEA, or North or South America. And then we have the number of earthquakes selected, which is just a simple count in Tableau. Now that we have an overview of the dashboard that we can add to our story, let's go back to our storyboard by selecting story 1. So the first thing we want to do is frame our story. A successful story has a well framed structure, meaning that the purpose or what you're trying to tell when we look at that visualization is going to be clear and concise. In this particular example, when we're talking about the trends of the earthquake over time, we want to answer a question. And that question will be, are earthquakes becoming more common? And specifically, are big earthquakes becoming more common? And I guess we got to define big, but we'll talk about that later in the video. We're going to use this question as our title. To do that, we're going to double click the story 1, and then type in, are big earthquakes becoming more common? And so now you see that the title of our storyboard has changed, very similar to making a title for the worksheet and making a title for the dashboard. So the default for any type of visualization is always going to be the sheet name. The first thing we want to do in this particular story is start with the big picture. So we're just going to copy and drag the dashboard into our story point. And once you drag it in there and it's highlighted in orange, it will automatically populate in our story point. This is just showing us a big picture of the earthquakes globally. And let's say we're going to name this caption. This is why we keep the caption. Thousands of earthquakes are recorded every year. Now, this just gives us a general overview. The next thing, when you're telling the story, you want to go to that next phase. What is that next phase in our particular case? How do we build upon the story here? To build upon the story, are big earthquakes becoming more common? We want to use the drill down feature. Right now, we have this magnitude of 4.0 to 9.1 as the range of all the magnitudes. But let's say we want to look into a different range, a larger range, and that's when we're going to define big. In this particular case, a big earthquake would probably be in the range of 7 and 9.1. To do that, instead of dragging or creating a blank story point and adding the map dashboard to that story point, let's actually duplicate the story point that we currently have. So let's duplicate this. It may take a while. And of course, you see that we have 2,000 of earthquakes are recorded every year. That is perfectly fine. And if I zoom in, you can get a better look at it. In this particular case, this is where we're going to change the range of our story point. The magnitude filter is where we're going to drill down and filter out those smaller earthquakes that we do not want in our particular data set so that we can narrow down to the bigger earthquakes that will answer our question. To do that, I'm going to zoom out here. We just need to simply drag the range to 7.0, if I can get it exactly. Or you can just type in 7. Now you can see that we only have 174 earthquakes in our scope. About 2 earthquakes each year qualify as a major earthquake, which it means that the magnitude is between 7 and 9.1. So let's say this, about 2 quakes per year is what we're going to name our caption for this particular story. Our major, right? Our major earthquakes. Let's add that just so we have a little bit more detail. The next thing, we want to probably identify mega earthquakes or something that may be a little bit bigger than 7. We're going to narrow down the magnitude range from 8 to 9.1. So let's do the same thing. When we're going under new story point, let's hit duplicate. We now have a duplicated story point, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to drill down a little bit more. Let's say we want to, actually, I'm not going to use that scroll wheel to be a perfectionist. Let's just do 8. So 8 to 9.1. Now we only have 16 earthquakes that are selected. We've narrowed down the scope, and you see that they're becoming less and less more common as they get larger and larger. And this is starting to answer our question a little bit as far as are big earthquakes becoming more common. In this particular case, it's starting to say that nah, they're not becoming as common. We're going to change our caption from about 2 earthquakes per year to say that there are some major earthquakes that are happening specifically in South America, a little bit on the lower North America side, and then we have some over here, which is in the Australia and Asia area as well. So let's name this caption. These megaquakes have drawn a lot of attention. But now let's move into one more approach. So we've started with the wide range, the big picture, and then we went down to 7 to get the major earthquakes, and then we looked at mega earthquakes, which is the 8 to 9.1 range. Now, let's say we want to look at the highest, or even highlight the outliers, so the 9 and above. We're progressively getting smaller and smaller as we minimize the range or lower the range. We're going to duplicate this particular dashboard again, or this story point. Duplicate, and now we're going to change the magnitude to 9. As you can see, we have 2 that are selected. We can see that this one is 9.1, this one is 9, and if we click on this 9.11, this is actually saying that it's the highest in the whole world that's ever happened. This is the highest magnitude that ever happened in the whole world. This could be considered an outlier in our data, and maybe need to do some more research onto why it actually is an outlier. Like we could copy and paste the data from the view, or maybe even look at some historical scientific knowledge to get a better insight of what might have happened and what might have caused this magnitude of 9.1. We're going to consider this as an outlier for now, given that it's 9.1, and we need to actually zoom in to this particular case. Let's say we conclude that this is an outlier and we want to zoom in on this particular magnitude and this particular point in our data visualization, so the viewer knows that this is going to be the outlier, the point that we're going to focus on when we are presenting. To do that, we need to navigate to these icons that pops up, which is the zoom in, zoom out icons. Hit the play button, at least that's what it looks like, the play button at the bottom of it. Then hit this cross section here. Then we can move this over. If you have a scroll wheel, you can zoom in, or you can hit this plus button here, or hit the minus. But if you have a scroll wheel, this is very convenient where you can zoom in to a particular point. And now we have finally completed our drill down method and even highlighted an outlier in the situation. We now have the ability to tell a story given our particular dashboard. After we've identified the outlier, we need to give a caption so that the viewer knows what we're actually focusing in on. And this is the Japanese earthquake that happened in 2011. Now you have a complete story built in Tableau. We have answered the question of are big earthquakes on the rise, and you can use this to present to any user of interest. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.